Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special interview. I'm Shereen Bhan and we're in conversation with a man who's holding three portfolios: railway, coal and finance. Minister Piyush Goyal, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Let me start by talking to you about the power sector, sir, your erstwhile ministry. You had a meeting with your counterpart in the power ministry today on the issue of how the government intends to deal with the Allahabad High Court order in the context of the Reserve Bank's Feb 12th circular. What is the thinking currently? Do you believe that a special carve-out just for the power sector is the way forward? When can we expect a decision on this front? I'm also given to understand that a parliamentary committee meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, which may take up this issue as well.
Well, we were meeting today only to understand the contours of the Allahabad High Court judgment and to ensure that all the sections of government, whether it is Finance Ministry, Power, Coal, the Reserve Bank of India, everybody works in tandem to address the concerns that the Allahabad High Court has raised, and also to ensure that the sanctity of the IBC process is not affected in any way. So we are very keen that the IBC process should be respected, should be followed. It's a very robust process which will ensure a fair treatment of all non-performing assets in the future. Within that framework, if there is a way to work with the power sector players and the bankers in consultation and under the advice and guidance of the Reserve Bank of India, we will try to find a solution in the best interest of the country.
If I could just take that point forward, you said that within the guidelines of the IBC, keeping the IBC code in mind and in consultation with the Reserve Bank, the government could try and find a solution for the power sector. But then there would be similar demands coming in from other sectors. The telecom sector, for instance, could also raise demands like the power sector has. What then, sir? Will this whole process not then be opened up, so to speak, for demands coming in from different sectors?
That's why I repeated that we believe that the IBC process should not be at all tampered with, but we have a Allahabad High Court judgment, and the purpose of today's meeting was to ensure that all the ministries and stakeholders have a common stand, respecting the Allahabad High Court judgment while protecting the IBC framework.
By when can we expect a decision by the government on this front, Mr. Goyal? What is your own expectation?
I think the banking secretary will be convening a meeting of all the officials and will then discuss the issue in greater detail. Today's was a preliminary discussion only to give the guidelines that should be followed and to understand the contours of the Allahabad High Court judgment.
If I may end by asking you specifically on this subject, sir, in your consultation with the Reserve Bank on this specific issue,
today was more to be on coal and railways, madam.
I know, sir. I know, but I want to, because this is something that the markets are watching very closely.
This I just answered since you mentioned. But I think we should focus on coal and railways. I'll come on the finance issues on some other day.
Okay, all right. Let me then talk to you about what's happening as far as the coal sector is concerned before I talk to you on railways. The Piyush Sinha committee's recommendations are awaited. This, of course, has to do with commercial mining. Again, a reform that has been long pending now. Are the recommendations in? When can we expect forward movement on the commercial mining process?
We have not yet received the recommendation, and as soon as it comes in, it will be examined and proper necessary action taken. But in the meantime, we are looking at opening up the mines for another round of auction for steel or other sectors, power, also possibly for the washery sector. So I think different proposals are under consideration, and we do hope that people will express interest and will be able to move forward for auctioning some of these mines.
Okay. By when do you expect, the recommendations to be in and for commercial mining in earnest to kick off? What is your own expectation in light of the groundwork that's already been done?
Well, I think the Piyush Sinha committee has had extensive discussions with all the stakeholders, also on the methodology of bidding, whether it should be a per ton bidding or whether it should be a revenue sharing model. So the team, the committee is working at what would be a robust framework. I'm expecting their recommendations in maybe by early next month. And after that, once we see the extent of their suggestions and we have discussions with other stakeholders in the system, we'll be able to define a time frame.
Since we're talking about mining, let me also get you to comment on what we've seen happen in Tuticorin with the Sterlite's facility there. You know, the criticism, is that while there is the need for the private sector to be involved in this, in the mining business, but there also needs to be much more checks and balances when it comes to the protection of the environment as well as the protection of the communities that are in and around that area. Given what we've seen happen in Tuticorin with now a permanent closure, so to speak, what is the view of the government on ensuring that we don't see a repeat? And do you believe that this is now going to hamper both interest in mining from private sector players as well as Vedanta's own interest in this sector?
Well, I do hope that this will not affect mining per se in the whole country. These are isolated incidents, and clearly, protecting the environment will always remain the priority of the government of India. Prime Minister Modi is a person who's been very passionate and committed to a better future for the people of India, a cleaner future, a better environment, and any compromise on that will certainly not be acceptable. So having all the requisite permissions and all the necessary infrastructure to ensure environment protection is going to be a very important element of mining going forward in this country.
Have you had any conversation with Vedanta, with Sterlite on the issue, sir?
I have not had an occasion to talk to any of them. It's an issue that happened in Tamil Nadu between the state government and the company. So I have not had a chance to get involved in any way, and nor a need has arisen for me to be involved in the local issue there.
Okay, let me talk to you about coal production, sir. I understand that power demand has now crossed the peak demand of 174 gigawatts in the month of May. 25 power plants, again, we are given to understand as of the 31st of May, are either critical or supercritical, which means that they have about a week's supply of coal. Can you explain to us what is the status of coal supply and what are the plans to increase coal supply?
Well, you'll be happy to know that in the first 2 months, April and May, production has been up by nearly 14% in Coal India alone. Dispatches are up by about 13-odd%. And very clearly, we can see a lot of traction in the industry. Demand is picking up. You must appreciate that there are two main reasons that has suddenly caused many of these plants to have a shortage of coal. It's not as if there is not enough coal or there is not enough coal being supplied. There is robust demand for power, which is a great sign. It confirms our understanding that economic activity is expanding very rapidly. But there's a second element which you will have to appreciate. One is the Supreme Court judgment, because of which Adani, Essar and Tata's plants in the West Coast, which were based on imported coal, have either downsized or completely shut operation. That additional power demand is now being met with domestic coal in the interior parts of India. So coupled with increased demand, that demand has added on the load on the coal and railway sector. Also, hydropower has only been about 88% of what was planned last year. So that has also bunched into an additional demand on the coal sector, which all of which put together has increased the need for coal very substantially, very suddenly. You will recall on 31st March last year, we had 69 million tons of coal. Right up to June, we were not able to get enough demand for coal, June of 17. It's only post-July 17 that we suddenly saw expanded demand for coal when hydro went down, wind did not produce to expected levels in the last monsoon, nuclear was down 2,000 megawatt, and then coupled with that, the Supreme Court order. So when all of these things happened at the same time, demand suddenly shot up, and that has caused some of these plants not to have adequate stocks. Of course, despite all of this, no plant has shut down or there's not been a power shortage. Despite all of this, we have been able to generate nearly 103% of the planned power generation in the first 2 months of this year, and coal-based power generation is actually growing quite robust, in a robust manner.
Okay. By when do you expect what you see as an aberration as far as the supply side is concerned, by when do you expect this to be fixed?
Well, I think it's a continuous process. After all, getting more and more production out means land acquisition, rehabilitation and settlement of villages, getting environmental clearances for expanded production. It's a whole ecosystem around mining. It's not a simple job where you switch on and off. Also on the railway infrastructure, you need wagons and rakes to carry the coal. You need adequate line capacity. And in many cases, we already are chock-a-block full on the main lines which carry the coal. So we are working on different areas simultaneously. We are also looking at tolling, where we use coal more efficiently at pithead plants. And when all of these things are put together, I'm quite sure that we'll be able to tide over the problem of adequate availability maybe in the next 3 or 4 months.
Let me end then by asking you on coal specifically, sir. What is the current supply-demand mismatch at this point?
Well, as I said, we've been able to meet the demand that we receive regularly. But ideal situation, we would like to increase the supply by another 200,000 metric tons every day, so that all these plants can build up their stock. And as against 9 or 10 days now, take it up to about 30 days, which would be an ideal situation. So our effort now is to build up stocks. On a regular basis, we are able to meet the needs of the power sector.